Episode 64, Mistborn the Final Empire book review. Welcome to the Visionary Variety Podcast, where we cover cool stuff like photo, video, film, books, and technology. So switch on your brain and enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast. In this episode, we've got a returning special guest, Daniel Walczak.
Hey guys.
We're super excited to have you back on the show.
I'm excited to be here.
And also on the show, we've got Angela Brock.
It me.
It is you. It be you. Mm-hmm. It's always great to have you back on the show.
Thanks.
You've been with us since the very beginning. It's pretty great.
Have. Pretty much.
I think episode 2, right? Or is it episode 1?
It was episode 2.
Awesome. Daniel was with us for episode 62, where we talked about all the audiobooks we've listened to lately and give a really great, just kind of an overview of the books that we love, and one of them that I didn't love. So if you love audiobooks, if you love fantasy and sci-fi and great stories, go listen to that episode. We also talk about how to get great audiobooks for free. You don't always have to pay $30 per book like you think if you're looking through Audible. There are other ways. So go listen to that episode. It's a good one. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on one book in particular. It's a new favorite of mine. It is Mistborn the Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Wow. What a great book, right?
I feel like we need to insert an applause track just right here.
Like 10 minutes of just solid applause.
Yep. Good book.
Yeah, I was really impressed with it. So I've been overdosing on sci-fi books for the past about 3 or 4 years. I just primarily only listen to sci-fi because I feel like I can judge a good sci-fi book based on like a synopsis or, sometimes the book art or the description. So it's easy for me. With fantasy books, I never quite know what I'm getting into because there's so many out there.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to finally be listening to some quality fantasy, and my goodness, this book is up there. I'd say almost with Lord of the Rings and Narnia. I mean, they're totally different and you can't really compare them, but it's high quality stuff. This is not just some no-name author that's trying to piece things together and just trying to make a buck off of an easy fantasy story. Like, this is in-depth, well thought out, well written stuff. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this book. If you haven't listened to it yet, we will have a non-spoiler section first where we'll just generally talk about the book without ruining it for you. And then there will be a very clear point where we are going to spoil the heck out of this book because we can't wait to talk about the nitty-gritty stuff in this story. But if you haven't listened to it yet, listen to the first part of this episode and then pause it. Go get the audiobook either on Audible, use the free trial. You can get 2 books. You can get the first book and the second book, or use your library app, which we explained in episode 62, and you can get the book for free. Listen to it, love it, and then come back and finish the episode. All right, so a little background about this book. Like I said, the author is Brandon Sanderson. The book came out in 2006, the first book, which is what we're talking about in this one. Kind of interesting. The Mistborn series is actually currently 7 books, and there's an 8th book in production right now. It's not finished. And the original idea by Brandon Sanderson was to have 3 trilogies. You just think of it like the Star Wars trilogy of trilogies, right? So his idea initially was to have a trilogy, a Mistborn trilogy, which would be, like straight up fantasy with magic and kingdoms and stuff like that. And then the second trilogy would be modern times with some technology and, urban modern setting. And then the third trilogy would be future sci-fi. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's different.
They'd all be in the same, the trilogy of trilogies, like the same universe, same whatever continuous story. And I love that idea. Honestly, I want to see books that connect fantasy and sci-fi somehow. Like, I don't care how they do it.
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool because I feel like that's an untouched kind of
like a niche sort of.
Yeah, it is. And there's some that have done it, but I personally have a few stories in my head that I want to do a really like epic fantasy story, but then at the end you realize they're in the future or some twist where it brings in a sci-fi element.
Yeah.
I guess I just spoiled one of my future books, but only the super fans in the future will have listened to this episode.
Hurry and claim your intellectual property before someone steals it.
Yeah. There we go. I can say, I know, right here in this episode 10 years ago. So, he originally, that was his idea to have a trilogy of trilogies, but things kind of changed. He wrote the first trilogy of the Mistborn books, and then he wrote what he thought would be a bridging book to the second trilogy, which, like I said, was going to be the modern urban, technology world books. So that transitionary book was the Alloy of Law, And he kept writing more books after that were sequels to Aloe of Law. So he kind of ditched his first idea. Yeah. He's like, his little transitionary, in between episode turned into 4 books.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That just means that there's a whole lot of books to come.
Yes, even more. For sure. If he sticks to his original plan, which I don't know if he's sticking with it or not. But yeah, so he did that. And then he wrote another book after those 4 books, which is not part of the Mistborn trilogy, but they call it like it's like a companion story, maybe a backstory or a prequel or something. I mean, honestly, I would love to read a book about the Lord Ruler. Like,
yes,
he's got a whole history that you just see little glimpses of in this book. And I'm not spoiling anything right here. This is just part of the book, but I would love to see his prequel story. Yeah, so that's where we are now. And he's working on another book, which I'm not sure if it's another Mistborn trilogy book or if it's, I'm not sure what this next book is coming out going to be. I don't know if there's any details about it yet. All right, so the book on Amazon, I looked it up. It's got 1,879 reviews, and they all average up to 4.5 stars.
Wow, that's no small feat.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Almost 2,000.
Wow.
So this book is up there. A lot of fantasy fans love this book. I posted about this a few times just saying, hey, I'm just listening to this book this week, and a lot of my friends chimed in. They're like, that is my favorite fantasy book. And honestly, some of these people, like, I would never expected them to be into any kind of fantasy or fiction whatsoever.
Wow. Closet fantasy fans.
Yeah, closet, yeah. They're all coming out of the woodworks, man, like cockroaches.
That's awesome.
So this book is a favorite of, non-super nerds. Like, this is not just like an ultra nerdy book, like normal people, quote unquote. That strange phrase I like to use occasionally. A lot of people love this book, and for a good reason too. All right, last tidbit that I learned about this book, this is from Wikipedia, is that the rights to the entire literary universe, which we call the Cosmere, that just refers to, like, think of it like the not the cinematic universe, but the literary universe of all these books. A DMG Entertainment owns the rights to these to adapt them into some kind of film or TV show.
Huh.
I would love to see that.
I'm gonna show some severe ignorance. What is DMG Entertainment?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
No idea.
Okay, all right.
I meant to look up some homework on them, but I got distracted by the lore and the fantasy book stuff.
You'd think one of us nerds would have used Google.
Yeah. Well, I was just scrolling through that Wikipedia article, like it was blowing my mind. Yeah, so they do have someone named F. Scott Frazier, which has a few movies to his name. He's working on a screen adaptation, so he's like doing the screenplay part of turning the book into some kind of script and flow for something film related. Honestly, I hope that this would get like a big budget Amazon, Hulu, or Netflix thing. Like,
that'd be pretty cool too.
Netflix original, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Although I am worried because, Game of Thrones really kicked off the fantasy big budget thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's done super well. And then we hear about Lord of the Rings getting approved, and that's in production now. And now we've got something else in the works with a fantasy. I forgot what it is, but I'm just thinking like, oh, now like skeptical stream service viewers that aren't familiar with this work are going to be like, oh, that's just another, trying to play on the popularity of fantasy stuff. It's not going to be any good. And they'll be totally wrong. But
completely.
I don't know. I feel like when you start going with trends or there looks like there's a trend, it can actually work badly for something. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I get what you mean. And I agree to an extent. I just hope that the originality of some of the elements of Mistborn really end up standing out to people, such as, the allomancy and such. You don't really see that usually in fantasy works, stuff like that. So hopefully that would stand it out from everything else.
Yeah,
like if they could get the special effects team and the choreographers from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, bring them in. Oh man, that'd be awesome.
That'd be pretty dope.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that people will get, like zombie fatigue of all the zombie shows, and then there's a sci-fi deep space, dark gritty fatigue, and now we're getting fantasy fatigue.
There was vampire fatigue for sure.
Oh, that was a few years ago. Yeah,
that was real.
Yeah.
Did you notice all those like no-name young what are they called, young adult vampire books? They all have the same covers. They all look just like Twilight.
I'm sure.
They like had a stark black background with like one color item like an apple, and then like a hand really like dramatically lit. They all look just like Twilight covers.
Coincidence? So I think not.
Yeah. Some graphic designer is just like banking on it. He's like, oh, I'm making all these books. They look the same.
He's got like one template and just moves a face.
Yeah. It's like, I need a stock image of a fruit. Throw it in there, and I need a hand. Boom. $5,000.
Oh my gosh. Genius.
All right, so let's get into the non-spoiler section. So first, let's give it a rating. What obscure object or reference should we use for this rating system? Other than stars.
Metals.
From 0 to 5 glass vials of metal, which is a book reference in case you're totally clueless. Go read the book. How many vials of metal will you give it, guys?
I mean, I'm definitely agreeing with the Amazon 4.5 vials. It's an incredible book. It's not flawless. Definitely one of the more engaging universes. I think we've already touched on that even a little bit, but lots of fun to read. Really cool magic system. Solid 4.5.
Okay, cool. Angela?
It's so hard to decide. I'm bouncing between 4 and 4.5 vials of metal. I might have to settle more on 4, honestly.
Okay. All right. I'm not mad. I ain't mad.
It's not my book.
I'm going to be generous and give it a 5.
What?
Whoa.
All right.
I don't have a list of like more than 2 things that I would fix. If I had control over the story, I don't know what I would like change or fix to make it better for me. And most franchises, even Star Wars, which is my main thing, I've got a list of like 10 to 20 things for every movie. I have like, this didn't make sense. This should have been this, whatever. But I don't have a lot of critiques on this. Maybe they'll come out as we discuss. Maybe I'm wrong. That'll be fun if I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
We shall see.
I hope you're right.
We'll see.
I hope you're right. All of my lingering questions, I need you to logically answer them so that I can make my rating a 5.
Come at me, bro.
Yeah.
Come at me.
Got some work to do on me, Daniel, here, because you got to bump it up a whole metal of vial here.
At the end of the episode, I'll be like, this is a 1-star book. I hate it. Trash. Use it for toilet paper.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm giving it a 5-star because I was immersed in the story. The characters were totally believable and natural. There weren't too many jumps in logic, like in dialogue. Sometimes I feel like authors don't know what a character would do, so they just write something that they know how to do, and it doesn't flow naturally. Like, I'm like, that character would never have said that, or that change in emotion would not have happened in that scenario, that context. I don't remember too many of those happening, if any at all. So yeah, the dialogue was good. The world building was great, and there was just so many breadcrumbs laid everywhere. It gets me excited. Maybe part of my 5-star is because of the anticipation for what is not in the book.
That I completely understand. Feel that too. Yep.
Yeah, maybe that should influence my rating for this book because it's things that aren't in the book that I'm looking forward to. But I know they're coming because there's so many little like super subtle and not in your face references to things.
You very much hope that they come at the very least.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
So that's part of my 5-star. Maybe without that it'd be a 4.5 or 4. Were you guys familiar with anything of Brandon Sanderson before reading this book?
I've never heard of him, honestly. I've never heard of the series. So when you just like threw it out there, we should read this. I'm like,
who?
What is this? Is it
probably
good?
Some noob?
I'm in the same boat with extremely little exposure. I think I had seen Brandon Sanderson in a couple of nerdy subreddits as I was looking for new authors and audiobooks. He might have been mentioned here or there. But this is definitely my first exposure. And I mean, as a result, definitely looking forward to more.
Yeah, he's got a big fan base. A lot of dedicated fans that are doing a lot of fan art for these books and other books he's done. And I haven't even looked at his whole bibliography, but I did come across a sci-fi book he wrote that seemed really great. Very, very cool. So if an author can do good fantasy and good sci-fi, he'll let me impressed because that takes some serious skill.
Yeah.
And a really bright mind and imagination, which he definitely has. I would love to just like have like a 4-hour lunch with this guy and just pick his brain on stuff.
Oh my gosh. Insane.
Do an episode with him.
There you go.
Snap. There you go.
I'd gladly do a 4-part episode with him.
Oh my gosh.
Cool. All right. Well, from this point on, you have henceforth been warnedeth of spoilerseth.
Wow.
There be spoilers.
Oh, man.
All right, so let's get into this book. So the first thing I want to talk about, kind of a big picture, kind of an aerial view look at the book, is the world building. What'd you guys think about the world that's presented in this book?
I thought the world building was probably my favorite aspect of the book by far, because he did such a great job building up a lore and a magic system and thousands of years worth of history that you don't really even get to barely scratch the surface on in this book. And different creatures that he references at some points and barely alludes to, and some he goes into more in depth. And it's just, everything was so good so far.
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of spokes to the wheel of the world building. Like you said, creatures, magic, locations. You actually read the book. You had the physical book, right?
I did, yeah.
And you have a map, which I did not seen. Oh.
I love having maps in my fantasy books. It just makes it feel like you know where everything is. It doesn't seem like they're just pulling stuff out of thin air. Like, this is over here. And you're like, okay.
Okay, somewhere on the left side of the page, somewhere on the right side. East, west.
Yeah. Feels more real that way to me.
Daniel, what were your thoughts on the world building?
For me, I mirror a lot of those sentiments, and I also kind of lean in the other direction sometimes, where there's so much introduced right off the bat that if you're not accustomed to that volume of world building, you might just be confused. You might not be able to fill in all of the cracks. So for us seasoned nerds, we can handle that, and it is fantastic, and it's a really cool world that he starts on. But at least in this book one. But warning to anybody that is newer to this genre: just give it time and let the world build, because the answers aren't given to you right away. You have to make assumptions as you go, and you'll find that a lot of your assumptions and your questions were either wrong or they get answered within the next couple of chapters, and holes are filled in as you go, and in a really, really cool and satisfying way. It keeps you engaged really, really well.
I agree.
Can we make up a new term, world building oversaturation? Can we make that the thing?
I think so.
Because I experienced that, not with this book, but with another Brandon Sanderson book that I started after this book, which is the first book of the Stormlight Archives, which is a totally different trilogy. Although I have picked up on some rumors that they're actually like connected in a weird, big universe kind of way. But yeah, different trilogy, different characters, everything, called Stormlight Archives. The first book is The Way of Kings. And wow, that was just like stuff's being thrown in your face of like 1,000 years ago. There's this huge epic battle, and then it just totally changes scenes to another amazing fantasy world, different time period, different people, and it's like boom, boom, boom in your face. I couldn't handle it all. I was like, I need a flow chart with some push pins and red string and newspaper clippings all over my wall.
Nice.
And
crazy wall.
World building saturation. That's the word.
Yeah.
Oversaturation.
Just be ready for it, people.
Yeah. But this book is nowhere near that.
No.
Daniel, you mentioned one of the creatures. It was just super creepy to you. Tell us about that.
So I'm first, maybe the first chapter, this creature is kind of introduced in the story, and I'm excited to get into the book. And I message you, and I'm like, Mist Wraiths, creepiest creature ever. And it really, so these guys, they're introduced as almost this conglomeration of different animal and human parts and heads and eyes and hands and torsos in every imaginable direction, and it's this really creepy creature, and it apparently kind of absorbs whatever maybe it kills or eats, and then it can replicate it. But I guess the younger of these chondra is their species name. The younger ones maybe don't know how to present themselves in a way that makes sense to other creatures, and so they just kind of start adding appendages as they see fit, and it becomes this massive glob of body parts. And,
what did I compare it to when you messaged me? It was like human centipede meets
oh my gosh.
the thing.
Yeah.
I think that was what it was.
Cringeworthy.
Hashtag gag.
As if I didn't think those things were weird enough. You just had to push it further.
Yeah.
Combine the thing and human centipede.
I don't like that.
Yeah, that was kind of out of the blue. I was like, whoa, we got fantasy creatures. You don't have a lot of fantasy creatures.
Not a
There's a
lot,
few.
no.
There's the Inquisitors. They're
Mhm.
kind of fantasy-ish, and then there's the Kolas, which is really quickly referenced. I don't even know if they explain who they are.
No, that's something that I picked up on. They kept referencing that there were these terrible things that were kind of like way out from
in a different like land.
Yeah, but then they never made an appearance in this book, so I'm assuming they will in a future
One of those.
Yeah, I think they're coming into the second book. I actually just started the second book today.
Oh, snap.
Which I'm super excited about.
With spoilers.
There's a few really big world terms that are used that refer to like much bigger concepts that they're not even addressed in this book, which might make you say, well, like, what answers am I going to get out of this book? You'll get lots of answers, but there's so many more things to learn about this universe. There's one really quick discussion between Vin and a house servant who serves the good guy team in their like little bar place, and she says the change bringer. It's like a name of like an entity. And as I was looking up stuff about the Cosmere, that's one of the names for like the creator, I think, is the Changebringer. And yeah, like that's like super high level stuff. And there's sort of like Lord of the Rings, there's different levels of deities and like pieces of the deity.
Right.
So I haven't even had time to research it because there's so much into this universe. It's unbelievable. But there's like shards of the creator. So I don't know if the creator like broke into pieces accidentally or was defeated or I don't know what happened. But there's shards. There's shards everywhere, and this planet has 2 shards, which we'll get to later.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I want a shard of the creator. I want one.
Why couldn't he put himself back together? Some kind of creator he is.
These omnipotent creatures.
So much. But now he's omnipresent because his shards are all over the galaxy. Universe.
Maybe it's a smart plan.
Yeah, so there's shards. There's something called the Sliver of Infinity. I'm like, what is this talking about? Then there's the Deepness, which is some vague force that supposedly the Lord Ruler fights.
I really want to know what that is.
Yeah, and then they reference after the Ascension, which I guess is whatever happened to the Lord Ruler. He ascended, and that's how he is now. So there's the Ascension, which happened 1,000 years ago. There's the Well of Ascension, which is the title of the second book. And yeah, there's just so many like big scale things that really excites me because I like that kind of world building where it lays out these big ideas and you get to explore them later or eventually.
Right.
I feel like you get a lot of that in Lord of the Rings with the different, levels of reality. Like, well, the elves are so magical. And then you learn about like the Maiar and like, well, those are magical. Then there's a Valar and like, that's magical. And there's the god creature. It's just like all these different levels, it just depends on how much you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's, kind of like the real world. As we grow up and as we learn more things about reality and our world around us, we realize like bigger levels of the universe, even going beyond science into, God and things like that. So I feel like that kind of mimics real life in a certain way.
Yeah.
Maybe philosophically.
Yeah.
So another part of the world building that I liked was all those little hints that it dropped about the Lord Ruler. And it's such a great misleading trip it takes you on.
Yes.
Because man, I was building up this theory and this prequel story about the Lord Ruler, about how he was this good guy. He defeated this ancient enemy and saved the world, and he was in it, but the power and the fame corrupted him. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That was my theory. Was like he was good and then he turned bad because of his success and he gained all these superpowers from the monster or whatever.
They were really leading you towards that theory, so I don't blame you one bit.
So it wasn't just me. What did you get? Did you have any kind of like, did you have a headcanon about him? Until the twist at the end.
I kind of thought the same thing, but I'm like, can it really just be that cut and dry? Because there's got to be something to it. But I honestly did not see it being, his Terraceman steward, whatever you call him.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like all along I was like, man, there were so many hints that it was going to be him, though. Because in your all's audiobooks, before the chapter officially started, did you guys get excerpts from the Lord Ruler's book? Okay. Yeah. I didn't know if you guys had that or not. And they mentioned that Terraceman in it and how they didn't really like the Lord Ruler and all that. And he's jealous of him and all that. So it just makes sense once that twist is unveiled.
And they mentioned all the hiking and stuff, and it was him. He was the servant, the hiking servant. Whatever.
Yep. They definitely led me on to a little bit. I hadn't formed a final opinion on that point of the story, and so when it came up and they dropped the twist, it was just all the pieces coming together.
Right.
Yeah, I love that feeling. It's
Yeah.
it's like a dopamine thing when you get into these books.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, and the last thing that I wanted to bring up about this story is similar to when we discussed the Battle Angel Alita, that there is a caste system in place, and it's pretty simple in this book. It's really just there's two groups of people. There's the Ska, which is the general populace, the working class, poverty, and everything below royalty. They're all Ska, and they work and they do the bidding and stuff in the kingdom and outside the kingdom. And then there's the nobility, which is, of course, serves the Lord Ruler more directly, and they've got the powers. At least most of them do.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that little bit of the story where the reason why they have powers is because the Lord Ruler gave their ancestors 1,000 years ago powers, like as a way to say, hey, thanks for supporting my, reign or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just blessed them with powers. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's how people have powers today, is through ancestry, kind of like the Jedi, which is sort of weird. I think they have made that canon in Star Wars, is that to have the Force, you have to have got it from your parents, which is kind of problematic because Jedi can't have kids. But anyway,
Well, then.
another episode for another time. But we've got that similar midichlorians. We've got magic being passed down through lineages, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the mixing and matching and degradation of genes, there's just mistings, which they're not a Mistborn, but a misting only has one power versus all of them.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, the first time I heard the word Ska, I didn't realize it was referencing a human. And being that this is my first introduction into this universe, I didn't know. So I was convinced initially by the way the noblemen were treating the Ska that they were a different species.
Like orcs or something?
Yeah, like legit. I was so confused. And it's possible that I missed a description listening to the audiobook and just kind of like went over it. But I was legitimately confused by the Ska. I was like, what do they look like? Are they blue? Are they like the Twilight?
What's wrong with them?
Do they have things coming off their head? Like, why are they so looked down on? What's the problem?
Yeah. I was wondering the same thing. I was wondering if there was any sort of like physical differentiations between the Ska and normal people, because they didn't really make it totally clear if they were just regular humans or if there was something setting them apart.
And they don't introduce them as anything but Ska. Like that's what they are referred to as. So you think it's referring to them as a species. You don't really catch on, for me at least. A little bit later, it was a class, not a species.
Yeah.
I kept thinking about music.
Oh my gosh.
No, this is a fantasy word, not music. Stop it, Brain.
I guess I never got that feeling because when I was reading the book, it's spelled with 2 A's and not one. So it helps set it apart from that.
Yeah. The benefit of audiobooks is you know how to pronounce things, but it's also a downside because you don't know how they're spelled.
Right. I know. I could be pronouncing characters' names wrong throughout this whole podcast. I don't know. We'll see.
Kelsire, yeah. Vine.
Oh my gosh.
So in my mind, the caste system kind of also included the obligators and the inquisitors.
Oh, you're right. Yes. They're above nobility. You're right.
Yeah. So and they're above nobility, but like the obligators are only, like, to me, marginally above, because I saw in a couple of instances where the obligator was obligated to obey a nobleman. So there was instances where their authorities kind of overlapped, which I thought was really interesting, because there's a lot of scenarios where the Lord Ruler allows the different classes and the noblemen to bicker amongst themselves, and it's just a way that he keeps everyone in check and kind of under his rule. So I thought that played in really, really well.
Yeah, I think the Lord Ruler would promote heads of houses that were successful and useful for him. He would promote them to be an obligator.
Yeah, or bring them into the Inquisitor group there.
Yeah. Wow, what a twisted thing that was when they revealed how you become an Inquisitor. That was insane.
I didn't see that coming either.
That was a great twist with his brother.
That one got
was
me.
Pretty intense.
Yep. So I was telling my wife about the Inquisitors, and she was like, well, obviously they take the brain out as part of the process. That's how it can survive the spikes. And I was like, well, Marsh remains Marsh. He's still an ally to the protagonist. He's still himself. He doesn't lose any faculty at all. So I'm still, when we get into the criticisms, I want to know how the freaking Inquisitors survive. Because it almost seems Frankensteinish a little bit.
Yeah,
it is.
It really does.
Yeah, I definitely have some answers to those. We'll get to later.
Oh, snap.
Possibly in the magic system discussion we'll have. So,
Mm.
speaking of which, that's a good transition. Let's talk about the magic.
All right.
This has got one of the most complex, but also it's somewhat easy to understand. But if you want to get deeper, you can get to the really complicated parts. But there's a lot of stuff going into this magic. I don't. Any other franchises you've read? You've read a lot of fantasy, Daniel. Any other fantasy series you've read have like elaborate, well thought out magic systems?
The Divine Dungeon series is a really cool take on magic.
It is. But, I like that.
But not as creative, I think, as this one. This is definitely a unique magic system. I'm excited to talk about it a little bit with you.
I like that it's materialistic in that it uses actual materials. It's almost not scientific because there's metals and there's alloys and, it matters what the molecules are, which is really interesting. I love when they're doing fantasy, supernatural stuff, but based on real scientific things.
It's like alchemy and magic combined.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and that's probably where he got the idea.
I'm sure.
So are you saying that there's kind of a correlation between steel and pushing?
Not in the directions like that, but I just mean like this magic system, however it's established, responds to specific elements. And I feel like that's a cool little nod to actual science, but then they're bringing in the fantasy, supernatural stuff that you can't really be explained.
Gotcha.
I just like the mishmash of it still being a material-based system. Like in Lord of the Rings, like where does magic come from? We don't know. How is it triggered? How can you run out of magic? We don't know any of that stuff. It's just you just kind of take it for granted and you just take it for what it is. And honestly, magic's not a big part of Lord of the Rings.
No, Gandalf hardly ever.
Yeah, I know. Come on, jerk, save the day already. Jeez. Get those eagles over here already. Gosh.
Let's not talk about that one.
Yeah.
That's another episode right there.
There it is.
Where are the eagles at, though? So in the story, it explains to us how there's 8 different powers that a Mistborn can access. If you're misting, you can only use one of them. So if you eat that metal, you can, use that power. If you eat the other metals, I guess you can't access them. They won't do anything for you. But Vin and Kelsier and another Mistborn that he said he met. They never go into that in this book. I hope that gets explored later. But he did mention, remember that? He met a Mistborn in his life.
Yep.
One thing I love about the magic system is how there are, say, one metal does one power, but then there's an alloy of that metal will do kind of an opposite power. I think that's really interesting, and just makes for a fun kind of all-inclusive system that just sort of jives together. For example, steel will push metal away. Iron, which is an alloy of steel, will pull it towards you. Pewter increases your physical strength, but tin, which is an alloy of pewter, will increase your senses. So instead of giving super strength, it gives you super senses. And they kind of complement each other in a really interesting way. And of course, we've got zinc for inflaming emotions and brass for dampening the emotions. Then there's copper for hiding your allomantic pulses. In other words, like cloaking yourself from other sensors. And then bronze, which is seeking. You can hear other person's allomantic pulses, where you can find them if they have allomantic powers. So really cool system. There's some really beautiful tables you can find online if you do some Google image searching. Although, minor spoiler alert for future books, you may see other metals there that you might say, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
So if you want to keep the mystery and the big reveals throughout the books, don't look up any of those charts. Don't even go to Wikipedia because it's all there.
Double spoiler alert for those that have actually read the book.
Yeah. If you guys were misting, what one power would you guys pick?
I'd be a Mistborn.
Yeah.
that would be my power. Mistborn cop-out. I really liked the more like emotional manipulation ones. Probably a soother would be a lot of fun, I think. Breeze was a soother, right? He was a really cool. Great. He was a cool character, and I really liked his what he was able to do. And as you develop that power, not only be able to soothe someone that is, not only being able to soothe someone that is, like angry, but being able to soothe the crowd and being able to kind of manipulate, kind of on a broader scale would be.
Man, that's like Jedi mind tricks. Right? That's like Jedi mind tricks right there.
It is. Oh, absolutely.
You will massage my feet, honey.
Oh my gosh.
Backing up 1 second on the pushing and pulling abilities, kind of the different metal pairings. I thought it was really interesting that it followed really closely with physics, where, you know, like you're pushing truly directly away from the object, or, you know, directly past the object.
Yeah, that was cool.
There's no like manipulating. Yeah, you're not Magneto, where you can do anything you want and reshape metal. I mean, you're literally just pushing or pulling it, and it really followed, you know, kind of the science of like gravity and weight and mass. And so if you were, you know, if two people were pushing a coin against each other, you know, the smaller one is going to get...
Greater weight wins.
Yeah, exactly. You're just going to get smashed.
I actually have a skepticism. As much as you love that, and I agree, I have a skepticism about the physics we'll get into later in the skepticism part of the episode.
All right.
So hold on to your pants. It's coming.
All right.
Okay.
So, I would probably want to have the steel pushing power, because I loved how they were just jumping over stuff. And like I said, crouching tag or hidden dragon fights.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so cool.
Well, it's interesting. Those powers like steel and iron were so cool because they were used in tandem. So you could do cool things like that. But imagine if you were just able to push, you'd be able to like
be in trouble.
Go. You just wouldn't be able to stop. There'd be some interesting issues just being one, and that's as we get into criticisms down the road, this one or all powers thing. I wouldn't want to be a Misting. I would either want to be a Mistborn or nothing. Like, I don't want to deal with that. But if I was going to be a Misting, because I wouldn't just blow that off, of course, I would totally be a Soother.
I definitely had some fear of heights anxiety happening.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I couldn't do any of that. There's nowhere. I would have a heart attack in midair, and that'd be it. You can't really utilize steel pushing or iron pulling super effectively, I don't think, without having the other one to complement it. Otherwise, you're just going to go flying off, and you can't pull yourself safely to the ground or anything, so you can't even use them in cool ways. So I would probably just want to have like pewter, I guess, be a thug, just because I'm tiny and dainty. And I just like to be able to lift whatever I want, whenever I want, without anybody's help.
Throw a large man across the room.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet. And it also lets you move super fast too, so that's got a lot of benefit too.
Yeah, pewter would be a really cool one.
Yeah, if you're small and petite like Vin, you know, it's even better for you because you don't have the weight to mess with. Like they explain later in the book, like Vin is effective as a pewter user because she's so small, and that was really cool.
Right.
Yeah. If you do end up getting pewter powers in real life, you should get into roller derby, because you would totally just dominate that game.
Yeah.
With pewter.
Okay, so the next part of this magical system is feruchemy, which not all, but some of the Terrace people have. And they were so secretive about it for like half the book. I knew there was something going on with this guy with Sazed, and I'm just like, what are these earrings? What is this metal? Like he mentioned a metal mind. He used a metal mind to get to the castle to save Vin. I'm like, what the crap is a metal mind?
Yeah,
what is happening?
I know.
Here?
I saw that reference. I was like, wait, what? And that's another thing. You know,
I wrote that down.
Reference a little thing, and you're like so confused, and then they bring it up a couple chapters later.
I love
Explain everything.
Now, unlike Lost, which leaves all these hints everywhere and then never addresses them. If you like the payoff of getting answers, don't watch Lost.
So true.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
Most disappointing.
So yeah, feruchemy really was one of the Lord Ruler's best kept secrets. And I guess the reason why he wiped out all the feruchemists and all the Terrace people and enslaved them and stuff was to make sure that no one would realize what he's doing, how he's in lengthening his life, and staying resiliently young and all this stuff, and also how he's working the system to burn feruchemist metals for allomancy, and the other way around, he was burning allomancy metals for his feruchemy.
Yep.
So there's like this weird like feedback effect where he was able to enhance his powers because he can have both.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that was really really cool, because when you think of like, what if you had both of those powers? How amazing would that be? That would be awesome.
One of my thoughts on the magic system is what kind of forgotten magics are there? So feruchemy actually kind of answered that question slightly. I got an inkling right off the bat. Once they started using metal, surely there's more. And so they kind of stuck with the metal theme with feruchemy, but it lent to the idea that, man, the history is so imperfect, and the retention of knowledge was intentionally broken. And so I wonder, and then introduce the keepers. I wonder what other types of magic there were in different parts of the world. Were there other things other than metal that were sources of magic? Just all sorts of questions popped into my mind, and I'm really curious if he's going to bring any other types of magic out, or if it's always going to be, kind of this metal-based magic. So
yeah, because of the whole metal aspect, I just kept going back to sci-fi themes. I was like, what if this is so far in the future? These are like nanobot materials.
Oh my god!
There's like an AI controlling all the powers. I don't know. I was going real far with that metals.
Only
super sci-fi nerd.
Yeah, too much. That's what happens when you listen to too many sci-fis. And then you try to enjoy it. It's just a fantasy book. It doesn't work.
It doesn't even work.
No, it's not magic. That's like quantum energy.
My Lord. Terrible.
Start thinking real deep. So here's some interesting stuff that I learned about the magic system as a whole. So there's actually 3 types of magic. There's the allomancy, which uses metal in your stomach to give, the 8 or 10 powers. Then there's ferrochemy, which is, physically touching metals on your body to store memory and knowledge and things like that. And then there's another type which we see because we see the Inquisitors. We don't quite understand what's happening, but it is explained how they get their powers and how they're super strong is hemalurgy. So hema is referring to blood, right? Hemoglobin. And then basically what happens is if you stab a metal spike through someone's body that has a said power into another person's body, they get that power. And that's hemalurgy.
Whoa.
That's why they're spikes, and that's why they're super powerful, is because they have stolen powers from Mistborn and Mistings to energize himself. And the Lord Ruler has been doing this to make, all the Inquisitors.
That makes so much sense. The Lord Ruler even kind of hints at how expensive it is, how hard it is to make an Inquisitors. That kind of ties it all together really well. Kind of like I was saying, pieces falling into place. It's like, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, so cool. To take it to another level, there's basically, like I mentioned shards earlier, there's 2 shards that I guess are on the planet, that take these personalities of kind of deities or semi-deities called Perseverance and Ruin. So these 2 deities have this drama back and forth of Perseverance wanting to give life and preserve and enhance things, whereas Ruin is like entropy. It's just a mindless force that wants to ruin things and degrade and destroy, the downward spiral of entropy, basically, in all aspects of life, physical, mental, energy, all that stuff, order, things like that. So it's kind of like yin and yang. Think of it like that. But they're like semi-sentient, I guess, somehow. Maybe they're super intelligent. I haven't quite gathered the feel of what Perseverance and what Ruin are, but they basically represent the different types of magic. So allomancy, what are you doing? You're using a small piece of metal and you're getting a whole lot of bang for your buck, right? You're gaining energy, almost anti-entropy, anti-thermodynamics. You're actually gaining energy out of something small and useless, and that's allomancy. And what allomancy is doing when you're getting these powers, you're actually tapping into the energy of Perseverance. Like their body is Perseverance's body, if you will, is providing you what you need to do the power. So that's Perseverance. It's giving you something, right? It's persevering. It's going upwards. Whereas Ruin, which is going downwards, is hemalurgy. So when you spike through someone's body to get their powers, you're actually losing a little bit of their power. You're not getting 100% of their power. You're getting like maybe, I don't know, some other percentage less than that. So there's a loss. There's like an entropy effect applied. And also you mentioned the spikes in the brain, like how are they alive? Well, magically somehow when the spikes go into your organs to receive the power from someone who's dying, it doesn't actually like destroy your organs somehow. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But there's like a little Mary Sue trick there where you don't actually.
That's nice.
Die.
I'm going to add that to my criticism section in the bottom.
Yeah. A little far-fetched.
There's always going to be something like that in every fantasy-based book, I think, especially with magic.
I mean, at very least, they should have some kind of infections, right? Am I right?
Come on,
sure. I mean, they're not very pretty, so there's that, I guess.
Keep those puncture wounds clean. So apparently later in the book series, somehow Perseverance and Ruin are joined together to form harmony, and that's what ferrochemy represents. Ferrochemy, if you think of it, it's really a balance, right? you're not gaining anything, you're not losing anything. You're just balancing it out. So if you can't see for 2 weeks, what happens when you activate it? You can see extra for 2 weeks more. So it's a balancing act. There's no breaking of thermodynamics, if you will. You're maintaining equilibrium. It's just displaced through time. So like, you were a stick skinny little scrawny teenager for a month, and then the next month when you activate that metal, you're like a Super Saiyan.
Right.
So yeah, kind of a cool little triad there, if you will, of the perseverance, which is allomancy, the ruin of hemallurgy, and then the balancing act of feruchemy. Pretty beautiful and really creative. Yeah. Got to give it to Brandon Sanderson, man. That guy's something else.
I don't want to think of how long it took him to come up with all that stuff.
Yeah, for real, years. All right, let's talk about characters. You guys have any favorite characters or anything you liked particularly about them?
And Kelsier is a good one.
Yeah.
And Ben's cool too. I liked Elend a lot.
Zayzid has got to be my favorite.
He's cool. There's so many good characters.
I think.
And Breeze. I mean.
Yeah, Ham's pretty cool too. Both of them together.
Yeah.
What's another character building? What's another character name? Because they'll be awesome too. Hang on.
Best character is Spooks. There you go.
Spooks.
Oh my gosh. Having the wasn't there is.
I love the way he talks. It's so funny.
I tried to decipher it, but there's no reason to it.
Man, I bet it was like amazing for you guys to hear it come from the person's mouth reading the audiobook.
It was special.
I had to just try to comprehend it on the page. I'm like, what is this?
I found that whenever
is he all there?
Yeah.
I found that whenever authors write in a really weird way like that, and I have to read it, I don't take the time to read it. I just sort of skim over it. Like, even if they write in a really heavy accent and it changes the way that the words are literally written, I can't do it. Like, my brain fogs over and I skip over the text. I can't do it. And so I really love the audiobook because you get the whole thing. Yeah, you get the whole picture, and they even talk in accents whenever applicable. Yeah. It's great. I love it.
Did you guys laugh out loud like I did when that scene in the bar or whatever in the fort where one of the guys like makes up like spook language?
Yes.
he just, I forgot who it was, Ham or Breeze. He's like, wasn't there, isn't there, isn't there was, and then someone's like, you just made that up, didn't you? He's like, yeah.
I think it was Dachshund that did that.
Dachshund. I like him too.
He's a great character. Great character.
We just love all the characters equally.
Yeah, pretty much. They're all good.
I see a little of myself in all the different characters. That's great character writing and good. I guess with 25 freaking hours, you have a lot of time for character development.
True. That is like the second biggest thing I would compliment this book on after world building would be its character development, because there's just so many good characters and they show their personalities over time in a really believable way, in my opinion. Especially with Vin and how she transforms.
I think. Yeah. And there's no overlap. Each character is unique. They don't necessarily fit into a set archetype that's similar across book after book after book after book. The characters are relatively unique, and you don't see that all the time. So definitely had a lot of fun with them.
Yeah. I like the whole Rebel team, just Kelsier and his crew. The dynamics were funny. There was some great, just like natural comedy. It wasn't forced, like Thor Ragnarok. It was like genuinely real moments that someone would really say, and they would really laugh out loud at it.
I almost wonder if Brandon Sanderson like has a group of people that he has written these characters after, and they literally have conversations like this, because a lot of it really is pretty natural. You're reading them, or you're listening in my case, and it comes across so well. And you have to give some credit to the narrator in the audiobook case, but the author has a huge part to play in that. So definitely enjoyed that.
He does so many great voices. I love it. Like he does the Irish kind of Scottish voice, and he does Breeze's voice. I love it all.
Yep.
Creepy voice of the Emperor, sorry. The Lord Ruler.
Emperor Palpatine.
I'm mixing up creepy old dudes with superpowers. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. That's great.
So the Inquisitors, talking about characters, this is more of like a class of characters, but the Inquisitors were hecka creepy.
They really
they got
were.
Spikes. They don't have eyeballs anymore. They've got like mysterious levels of power.
They can hunt you down.
I was terrified when they showed up.
Yeah,
they hunt you down. They don't
tirelessly. They don't give up.
And that was an intense scene, wasn't it? When they were chasing Vin on the rooftops.
Oh my gosh! I'm like, how in the heck are you gonna get out of this one?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Beza to the rescue.
Yeah.
One of my least favorite things in any book ever is when there are nearly impossible, truly like nearly impossible tasks, and somebody who's never attempted it before somehow magically, improbably accomplishes it.
Right.
And I don't feel like that happened too often, but a little bit. Like with Vin taking down the Mistborns. You were talking about Chase on the roof, made me think of this. The other Mistborns and like several, like a whole assassination team, and she like single-handedly handles all of them. Like, come on, Brandon. Like, let's just be a little more realistic here.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a stretch.
Did you feel like their grand scheme to take over the entire like kingdom was a stretch too?
Yeah, throughout the whole thing, I'm like, what's going to happen to completely throw this apart? Because there's no way it will work out just because of writing stories. Something's got to go wrong.
But it did fall apart, which I appreciated.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, kudos to you.
The army gets massacred. And
I didn't think it was going to happen that way, where somebody was just getting a bit too eager beaver somewhere and decided to go take on Imperial army somewhere or garrison.
I'm reading Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, and it has a lot of the political intrigue and kind of gets you thinking along these lines. And this like taking down the entire empire. I actually had like the notion like they're thinking this out in a way where it's plausible, but there's definitely something missing. And the other characters started to catch on to Kelsier's greater plan slowly and slowly. And there's just little hints of it. And so there wasn't a whole lot of like disillusion, or there wasn't a whole lot of illusion for me on that one. I knew it wasn't the end game. I'm really kind of glad that they did take the Emperor down and they're able to put kind of a new structure in place. But the way they got there was so different from the original plan that definitely a cool twist though.
Yeah. I appreciate those books that have that element of realism where not everything works out, and not even the first plan, and sometimes not even the second plan works. Where it's kind of like you feel like you've been reading for a few chapters and you're like, shoot, when is something going to work out for this hero? It has this like unpleasant but a real world element, because that's how real life is a lot of times. We have these big dreams and schemes and things and dreams of how something's going to work out, and it just does not happen. And in a lot of fiction, it's the opposite of real life. It's just everything does work out.
Yeah.
They jump across that crevice and they make the landing. And they, shoot that one last arrow and it hits the bad guy right in between the eyes. It's like, it's not quite believable. But books like this, and many others that I've read, I've picked up on this story writing technique, is they bring in that real world aspect of, hey, things don't always work out. And I enjoy stories like that.
Yeah, believable or so.
So we see their plan fall apart in at least one or two different ways, and they end up just kind of having to do like a suicide run and just do whatever they can for the greater cause, and they do end up succeeding, but and in a really cool way. Did you guys like that twist at the end that they defeat the guy?
Yeah.
That was trippy.
Didn't I see
the useless metal, right? The useless metal that just confused her.
It gets me just a little bit on the practically impossible, improbable first time attempt thing, where she was completely ill-equipped to handle the situation and kind of magically came out on top by a stroke of genius that happened to happen right in the moment. So when it gets a little bit improbable like that, it drives me a little bit bonkers. It was a cool scene, but I was a little bit on it myself.
Right.
It was a good fight, though. Other than that little, the real way how she took him down was just realizing who he was, and how he did what he did. But like the fighting parts before that were really crazy, where he was pulling on the metal in her blood.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in her stomach.
Scary as
heck. I was like, whoa. Intense.
I thought that couldn't happen.
They said it couldn't. And Kelsey doesn't know everything, because Vin is able to see through brass clouds and or copper clouds. She can sense through them. Yeah. So, and I've started the second book and I still don't have answers to that. So that's being brought up right now. Is she's like, how am I able to break these rules? Like, there's something else going on here.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll get to that soon.
I wonder if she's got some ferochemist blood in her, and just like was in kind of naturally using allomancy without realizing what she was doing, maybe she's got a little bit of ferochemy going on without realizing it too, and she's just amplifying her abilities in the same way as the Lord Ruler was.
Hopefully, it's not all like stored in her mother's earrings she always wears. I wonder if that's gotta be something there.
The earring.
Yeah.
I thought that was how she was going to defeat him. I thought like the last ditch effort, she was going to shoot that thing across the room and just pierce him. Mom's earring.
Oh my gosh.
You can't control metal if it's in someone's body, which is kind of weird because that goes back to like the hemalurgy with the spikes in the body thing.
Yeah.
You can't affect them because they're in this flesh or whatever. But yeah, I thought that earring was going to be the saving grace. And it didn't have any role.
Nah.
It did nothing. I don't think it did anything.
No. I was thinking initially that maybe you could still see it with steel lines. So maybe that was like Kelsier's way of initially keeping track of Vin, because he tells her to keep the earring. So I wonder if if he knows something special about it, like he has a sense about it, or if if it was just his way of keeping track of her. I actually thought whenever he initially said for her to keep it, I thought that she was going to take it off because she was still super paranoid at that point about everything.
Yeah.
But then she didn't. She kept it. And you were talking about how Brandon Sanderson doesn't necessarily break character too much. I felt like that one was a little on the line where she was epically paranoid, and this guy told her to keep something metal on her body, and she kept it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I would have taken it off.
Well, she just had that much sentimental value to her, to where she let her guard down.
I guess that's what it was. Yeah, it's the only thing she had left of her mom.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that first opening scene where Vin is using what she calls luck.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was just so like, what is happening? But I don't care because it's exciting. And weird. She's like, I used up all my last luck that I had. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Luck?
It's such a It's such a great like basic understanding, or complete lack there of understanding, but just the way that she's able to articulate it in her own mind and work with it. It was really fun.
But my brain was like, all my neurons lit up when Kelsier explained. She's like, you must have had a little bit of metal from the spoon and from the water and from the plates, you know, in her body. That's how she acquired metal slowly. And that's why she never had a whole lot of luck, quote unquote, is because she didn't know. But I was like, oh, that's so like, it makes sense. From the pipes, right? The dirty pipes.
I just imagine like dealing with like 1 or 2 mana while playing World of Warcraft, and just that's all I ever had. And then someone gave me like a new limit of like 100, and that's what happened when she got the first vial. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
He's so great.
What did you guys think those quotes were for at the beginning of each chapter with those quotes? Who did you guys think that was?
I think at first I thought it was maybe Kelsier, because he was still a bit of an unknown figure to us at the time. I forget the exact moment where I'm like, this is probably the Lord Ruler's stuff. I think it was right before they found that book in his tower. Because I know by that point for sure, I'm like, oh, that's what this is that I'm reading before each chapter.
It's a great like misdirection, because those quotes are from someone that's like noble and good and positive, and they're struggling with things, which is good to see, but they seem like a hero figure, right? But then you're also getting slowly introduced to the Lord Ruler, who is awful and evil and selfish. But my brain started to think, you know what if? Like, what if this is him, or what if? That's why I thought it was him before he went evil or something, like corrupted him.
Right.
Yeah. Whenever he first mentioned like the Well of Ascension and being the heralded hero, whatever chapter that was, is when I definitely got the sense that it was the Lord Ruler, for sure.
Here's something funny I noticed. So this book is partially about another book, right?
What?
Like,
yep.
It's about his journal.
Oh, yeah.
Or rather, a large part of the story and the secrets that she needed to defeat him, she only knew because Seiza had interpreted the journal that they got from behind his throne. So this is kind of a book about a book.
Reading is power, everyone. That's what this book is really getting at.
Yeah, well, here's what gets weird. So is the Stormlight Archives, another fantasy trilogy from Brandon Sanderson. The first book, The Way of Kings, that's the name of a book inside the book. So there's a king that has an ancient book called The Way of Kings. So he writes books about books.
Oh my gosh.
So weird. Then my brain went to another level, and I was like, how many other fantasy books are books about books?
No.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I was about to say. Oh no.
Bilbo's journey, right?
Yeah.
At least the movie starts off with his journal. Do the books do that too? Is it
kind of in the books, Frodo writes Lord of the Rings and Sam finishes it up. And
there you go.
Yep.
A book about a book.
Yeah.
What's going on, fantasy writers?
Oh my gosh.
Daniel, you've read lots of fantasy. You agree? You disagree? Any other contributions to my conspiracy theory?
No, I think that Lord of the Rings and Brandon Sanderson is all that immediately comes to mind.
It's kind of meta. It's like we know we're reading a book from an author, but the author just loves writing so much that they put writing into the book they're writing.
Yep.
Tolkien kind of took it to another level because I think he wanted people to try to believe that Lord of the Rings took place in the past in the real world.
Really?
Yeah,
really?
like all of it sort of lines up with the geography of Europe or something, and we're currently living in like a 7th age or something like that. Yeah. So he wanted to treat Lord of the Rings as like a piece of history or something.
But he was a Bible believing Catholic. How could he reconcile those histories?
It's just fun.
Yeah, it is. I'm just fun. He's like, that whole Old Testament thing? Nah, that's Silmarillion. Yeah, they had it all wrong.
The authors of that time seem to like doing that because C.S. Lewis does that in the Silent Planet series. He presents it even in the book. He specifically the author is talking to the reader and saying that this book is real. That seems to be a thing from back then.
They were about midway through the book. I thought this book was kind of going a romancy. Did you guys get that too?
It took a shift. What's happening?
I was almost getting bored. I still enjoyed the scenes and I appreciate what was happening. But I was like, this is sort of getting into a rhythm of a teen romance book or, young adults, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where Nate lost interest.
Maybe.
For the listeners out there, Nate is not on this episode because he just couldn't quite get through the book. I don't know if he maybe missed some exciting details in the beginning or if he got to this kind of mid or pre-mid lull of the story where it's just sort of monotonous.
Mm-hmm.
Is this,
I don't know. Maybe he just didn't have enough time to listen, but yeah, he didn't finish it. So
is this where Vin is in the noble circles initially?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's doing the ball circuit and dancing and
if there's one chapter you can cut from the book, that's the one for sure.
I feel like it goes on for several chapters.
Make it 24 hours instead of 25,
Mm-hmm. It has a purpose, but at the same time, I was like, I feel like this is turning into a different book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why I would demote this, my rating for this book, a full, go instead of 5 to 4, because I feel like the middle of the book just seemed to drag on a bit. There wasn't a whole lot of exciting stuff going on. You had to go 12 chapters before something really exciting happened again. It was just a lot of planning and preparation and going to these balls and setting up the character development for her and Ellen. And while I did like it, all of that to a degree, I felt like they could have streamlined it somehow.
Yeah, I felt uncomfortably too much like a 12-year-old hormonal girl watching Twilight. You're trying to make me like this a little more than I should.
Yep.
Well, after that kind of somewhat boring, kind of story building part where she's going to the events and dancing, that fight with Shane was pretty awesome, right? The fiance of
that's
Ellen. Yeah, I love that fight with Shan. What was the trick she used? She put metal on an arrowhead.
That was with the Inquisitors later on. She put metal on the arrowhead, so they deflected the metal.
Yeah, she used
arrowheads.
it later, but she came up with the trick early on with Shan. I think the metal was deflected by Shan, but the arrow kept flying forward. Then it got her or something. It was cool.
Yeah, something like that. Man, I wish I remember better.
I love the weapons that are designed to not be metal. There's a lot of mention of that in this book, and the very
glass.
The very early mention of the glass daggers before you knew what metal what metals did what. I was like, why the heck does he have a glass dagger?
That's funny,
and it just kind of pulls you in that little bit more, you want to know the answer to the next question.
Yeah, I kind of guessed there would be something with metal magnetism or pulling, something with that. Because I was like, well, the only reason why it would be dangerous to have metal is if someone could yank it out of their sheath or,
right,
I don't know, control it through, whatever. That was cool. Yeah, the glass daggers. And there was wooden shields and things like that.
Obsidian axes.
Yep. Yeah, whole like fighting styles built around not having anything metal and fighting Mistborn. Yeah, really cool stuff.
Yeah, in The Way of Kings, which is the Stormlight Archives book #1, one of the opening scenes is this guy going into a castle to assassinate the king, and they call it lashing. They said he lashed himself to the end of the hallway, and he just goes zipping through the hallway with like no gravity.
Whoa.
So it's kind of like iron pulling, but just to any old thing, like any piece of matter, he can lash himself to and yank himself towards it.
That's
pretty cool scene. Very Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon-ish kung fu magic stuff. I love it.
I get the sense that you really like that movie.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
Did I mention I like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon?
just a couple times.
It's one of my top 5s. Like, I freaking love that movie.
That's great. It's interesting that we all find different like superpower related things that we kind of latched onto, because I was thinking X-Men the entire time, like Magneto manipulating metal. So definitely a different perspective on the book, and kind of sheds like a different light almost on the way you interpret the story. It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. I can see a little bit of Dragon Ball Z, pewter power-ups of the muscles.
Oh my gosh.
Flying around. Minus all the screaming. Thank God. Talking about similarities, the ending kind of after the final fight, there's more to the ending, which is Kelsier's death is the start of a new religion.
Yeah.
What does that sound like? I wonder.
Oh my God.
Some long-haired, probably wearing sandals. A lot like Jesus.
Yeah.
Definitely some similarities there to Jesus.
Oh, Kelsier.
They fake his return through the creature. What is it?
The Khandra.
The Khandra. Yeah, the Khandra is a more advanced Mist Wraith that's like sentient and whatnot.
Yeah.
And they can pull off the whole ruse.
Creepy.
So that was creepy and uncomfortable and face swappy.
Yeah, that was definitely weird. It freaked the characters out as much as it did the readers, though.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good. Yeah, I'm glad they weren't just like, oh, no big deal. Someone looks just like my buddy.
Yeah.
I've encountered scenes like that in movies and books where it's like, hello, this is terrifying. This is creepy. You're not reacting. But yeah, so this is really super similar to, the Christian gospel story where Jesus died for our cause. He came back to show victory. And in the book of Acts of the Bible, we see that he comes back in spirit form, or actually in physical form, to seal the deal,
Yep.
And to really make sure that this movement is more than a movement. It's a way of life.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
But I hope a Khandra just wasn't involved in that one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
No.
I find it hard to believe that Brandon Sanderson wasn't pulling on some Christian themes. Not saying he's a Christian, but just kind of borrowing from that general, religious book of things.
Not sure.
Yeah.
They did make a heavy emphasis on like religions at different parts of the book.
Yeah, they did.
Talking about how is it Sazed or is it Sazed?
Sazed.
Oh my gosh, I've been reading it completely wrong. All right, well, how he stores all these religions and kept trying to suggest different ones to everybody. How about this one? How about this one? So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe that's where they were going with Kelsier's death. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did want it to be kind of a pseudo-religion, just for the sake of hope.
Yeah.
And it's true, even if religion is totally bogus, it gives people hope, and it will cause movements, and it will cause change if the religion, has a purpose and has enough traction for people to run with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a Christian, so I'm not saying like Christianity is just nice because it gives people hope. I believe it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But other religions in the world that I don't see as legit historically or spiritually give people hope and causes change, sometimes for bad, but sometimes for good too.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a kind of a secular philosophy, is that religion can be good because it helps people, which is a great surface level way to make everybody feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Different topic for another episode. Or another podcast.
Yeah.
So Kelsier at some point decides and understands that he's going to die. And, he's moving forward with that plan the whole time. And I wonder, I'm just like, at what point? Was it the whole time? Was there a certain turning point where he knew there was a spot in the plan that failed? Like whenever the armies, through that idiot Ska took him and got mauled by a garrison. Was it at that point that he was like, okay, so things are going to change and now I'm going to die? Or was it all the way back at the beginning?
I don't think it was from the beginning. I feel like there was a time where he became secretive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he started spreading his name around to get this like lore about himself. going to house, doing that whole thing, building up a little fan base.
No, that's
Facebook
true.
likers. But there was sort of a turning point.
Yeah, when his crew started getting suspicious of his motives.
Yeah. That. So I think that's when he couldn't tell him. It's just sort of like Star Wars Episode 8, where for some dumb reason, the captain of the ship can't tell everyone that she's going to suicide run with flight speed, even though that would have saved everybody so much trouble.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
She can't tell that because they won't let her.
Yep.
So similar with Kelsier, I guess. So yeah, he became the martyr for his own little fake religion, and with the agenda of pushing the mindless scoff forwards to do something,
right?
Get off their lazy peasant butts.
Yeah,
and
dang
fight back.
Peasants,
you lowly peasant.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to some of our criticisms, and I don't know what you guys have. I have about 2 or 3 things here. Do you guys have any criticisms that you guys wanted to just get out on the table?
Well, I think I mentioned my biggest one was just that there was a lull in the middle where I feel like more could have been happening.
Yep. I didn't really have any preconceived notion going into the book, and one, I was not prepared to be reading a story with a female teenager protagonist, so that caught me off guard slightly. But there was some points in there where she just kind of got whiny and melodramatic and self-pitying, and somehow Brandon Sanderson captures the angsty teenage girl just too perfectly, just a little bit too well. So that was
he probably has a teenager himself, so
right. There you go. He was interviewing his daughter for this. Yeah.
Speaking of Vin, there's a scene near the end of the book. Oh, I might be blending this in with book 2. Not a spoiler, but she uses her metal pulling power to pull a cup into her hand.
Excellent.
But where does pulling draw everything towards your center, not towards your extremities?
Well, so unless she moved her hand toward her center.
In front of her. Yeah, she could have, but I don't know. There's a few other scenes in book 1 where I felt like, hey, wait a second. This is supposed to go all to like the central of your mass, I guess your heart, chest area.
What about when Kelsier was catching rocks and whipping them around and catching it and pushing it off again?
That was weird. That was a little confusing too. I was like, what angles are these things flying at?
Yeah.
It definitely seems like...
That was a cool scene though.
Yeah.
That was a really cool scene. I wonder if she, along with all of her other slightly above average powers, has like just the ability, because her hand weighed more than the cup, she could focus from her hand and pull something cool like that.
Or if you had a really huge fat hand and most of your mass is in your hand, like in your little tiny body,
like you were a mist wraith and you were just like one big hand.
This is getting really weird. I don't want to think about a mist wraith hand, Mistborn powers.
Or if you have elephantitis. Sorry. My next criticism had to do with the coin pushing, how they were jumping and running through the forest and stuff. So let's talk about weight distribution, because if you're putting all your weight, which I'll give Vin, maybe she weighed 120 pounds. She seemed kind of small. But if you put all your weight, okay, let's talk about the grown men. So Kelsier, probably 200 plus pounds. If you put all your weight onto like a 1-inch circle in the dirt, what's going to happen to that coin? Is it going to like somehow support all your weight on top of a layer of dirt? No, it's going to go down, like way down. And if you're in like a moist, there we go, there's a word. Trigger word, warning. If you put like a coin and you're just jumping and your force plus your weight is going down on these tiny little coins, like I feel like Newtonian physics would like give you half the push, because the coin would go down halfway and you would go up the other half, like equal opposite reaction.
If it was on a soft surface, probably. Magical. If it was on like concrete, maybe not really.
But even then, it might like crack through stuff. Like if you had a chisel with a sharp edge that's roughly the size of a coin, and you put 200 to 300 pounds of force, like you would break through some stone, a cobblestone, and stuff like that. Yeah. I just felt like these coins were doing nothing. They're just sitting there on the ground, no problem.
I wonder if there just wasn't enough detailed description of that. Like if we were watching it in a movie, I kind of imagine stones, like if it was like a cobblestone street, like the coin kind of chipping things and maybe shifting or getting into cracks.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of thought of that a little bit too.
Yeah.
What if your weight's on a coin and the coin shifts in between some stones and goes underground? You're like, oh, you fall. That'd be cool.
That'd be awesome. I never really thought about it in my mind, everything was above stone. So I never actually thought about it over dirt or over mud or something like that. possibly a hole.
It first occurred to me when that scene where they're using those preset metal bars in the forest. It was like a Alamancy highway.
Yeah, I love that.
But I felt like over time those bars would just be getting pushed down and down further into the ground and being maybe less effective. Or
I think they kind of solved your thought of getting pushed into the ground though, because if an ingot is maybe like 8 inches. And there was sets of 2 of them around each other and then 2 off to the side. Like, that's a pretty wide area where I could stand on that plot of ground and not sink into it or anything like that. So,
that would disperse the weight distribution, if you will.
Yeah.
But also gives them stability, which is pretty smart.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool, though. I got almost like kind of excited when they were explaining that scene. I was like, that's so smart.
I think I expected Reen to show up.
Yeah, right up until you found out that he got killed.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, that was a bit of a letdown there. I could have sworn he was going to show up at some point, be some sort of in the Imperial Guard or something. I don't know, be some sort of antagonist or something.
But they turned him into a total butthole into a great.
Yeah.
Well, not great, but he had enough sense in his heart to protect his sisters from to cover up her existence. Right. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Almost like you kind of had him as this anti-hero at the end there, instead of being a complete butt, like you're saying. Yeah. Kind of transforms into just a little bit, just like a half butt, not a complete butt. But, yeah.
Little booty.
Yeah. Mini booty.
Just the whole build up talking about, Reen left me. Blah, blah, blah. Keep bringing him up throughout the whole book. And then that was it. That was his reveal.
All of these emotional gashes and wounds in her from Reen abandoning her. And then it's all for naught.
Yeah.
She doesn't have daddy issues. She got brother issues.
Yeah. No kidding.
That's true.
So you were talking about Daniel not seeing, not reacting properly to, crazy things that happen. Did I miss Vin's reaction to her dad getting completely slaughtered right in front of her? Or did she just not react at all?
I don't think she really reacted.
I don't think she reacted very much.
And maybe she had no love for him, but you'd think there'd be some kind of sorrow of some kind. And maybe there was too much emotional dampening from the Lord Ruler. Maybe there's some justifications there, but just seemed like that was your bio dad. You'd think there'd be something.
Yep, good point.
No.
I don't know. I feel like if I was in her situation, did not know who my dad was at all, then found out within such a short amount of time before his death that he was one of the biggest jerks in the Lord Ruler's recruitment, then I would not care if he died, honestly.
Head jerk. Yeah. He's the head jerk.
Yeah. Head of the obligators, High Prelin, whatever his position was. I don't think.
High jerk.
Yeah. High jerk. Right. Priest jerk face.
Well. All right. Well, I think that. Do you guys have anything else to say?
I'm just sad that Kelsier got pimp slapped to death. Could have been.
That could have been a cooler death for sure.
I feel like it could have been cooler than that. But no.
I'm blanking. Tell me how he died again.
The Lord Ruler just backhands his face.
Yeah.
Oh, he broke his neck or something.
Yeah, broke his neck.
Ripped half his face off.
It shattered his face. Yeah.
Yeah. He just got backhanded to death, and that was it. Dang. That's it. No fight.
Pimp slap of doom.
He didn't even get a shot, real good shot at him. No bouncing around or anything. That's it.
I think that wraps up this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this book and this episode. If you guys have any thoughts for or against anything we've said, maybe we got something wrong. Maybe you had something else you loved or didn't love about the book. Let us know in the comments. You can find this post for this episode on our Facebook and our Instagram and our YouTube. Just go find those and comment and say, hey, I agree or I disagree or I love this, I didn't love this about the book. We want to hear back from you guys. And thank you for listening to this episode. We'll see you next week. If you like this show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find our previous episodes there and listen whenever you want. We love to hear from our listeners, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future episodes, you can reach us at tvvpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and have a great week.
While you're looking this up, I had a really funny thought while I was reading the book that Magneto might have been a Mistborn.
Totally.
Can't think of him the same way again now.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.